All right, everybody. Welcome back after the break and some awesome tunes from DJ Emily. Loving that playlist. Definitely got to listen to that because that's so energetic and it really does pump me up. I'm so excited for this because it's 3 o'clock here on the East Coast. I'm just wrapping up a long work week. I'd like a nap, but hey, after those tunes, that was awesome. Getting ready for our next presenter, and let's see if JR is ready too. We can bring him up. I'm actually really excited to introduce JR, mostly because he's actually a good friend. I met him through the Twitter community. I think after an event we had a conversation about guitars and found out he was really into guitars. I'm really into guitars, and we just hit it off. And we every once in a while we'll have these conversations where we're sharing stories about different guitar players and guitars and technology and what's new on the market and whatnot. So it's funny, we talk more about guitars than we talk about data viz. But he's been awesome friend, and definitely cool. See if JR is coming on. I see him on. We'll give him a minute or so to get all this technology up and running. Oh, there we go. We got him. So he's situating. So JR is he's a chartered accountant, and also he's really it's incredible to me. He's also well versed in not just Tableau but Alteryx, Power BI, and really all kinds of different analytic tools. So definitely a good person, and I was interested here to see modern Excel techniques for data viz professionals. So let's get JR on and take it away, man. I want to see more.
Awesome. Can you guys hear me okay?
You're sounding good. You're sounding good. I'll let you know also if your slides come up too. Video
Cool.
looks.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Let me just quickly pivot over.
When you
One
bring it up
second
too,
here.
I'm going to ask you how to pronounce your last name because I've been saying Copreros.
Yes, it's Copreros. That's right. Copreros is right. So you hit the nail on the head there. So thank
I've
you
seen
so
a
much
couple
for
of
getting
people
this.
kind of get to your last name and they're like JR.
Awesome. All right. So can you guys see my screen okay?
It's up. It's up. I see slides. You are good to go, man. Enjoy.
Awesome. So guys, thank you so much for joining my talk, and thank you, Caesar, for the warm welcome. This is my first time ever at the Fringe Festival, so thank you so much for putting this together, Emily and team. It's been such an awesome experience just hearing from everyone and all these cool nuggets and tips and tricks, and certainly hope you'll be able to take some of that away from my presentation as well. So as Caesar mentioned, this talk is on modern Excel techniques for data viz data prep. And really the genesis for this topic comes from my background as an accountant. Coming out of university, Excel was the first tool that I learned. And Excel was actually a necessary milestone for me to eventually move into more complex forms of data analytics. And as Heidi actually mentioned in her talk yesterday, a lot of our Tableau journeys, if I may say, actually started and began in Excel. So this is both an ode and also hopefully a revelation to some people who may not be aware of what I'm about to share. Cool. So moving along. Quick high-level agenda in terms of what I plan to cover. We'll do some introductions in terms of my background and my history. Then we will define what is modern Excel, because I think a lot of people can be confused by that terminology. Then we'll go over some common use cases, an example of how to use modern Excel for data viz. And in this case, it's how to use modern Excel to prepare your data for data visualizations. Let me just quickly, I think we're good to go, yeah. One thing I want to note here is anything that I'm about to show you here can be accomplished in other tools and software such as Tableau Prep Builder or Alteryx. And really, as I'll mention in my key objectives in the next slide, it's really about expanding your toolkit to go beyond just one or two tools and really see how you can become more flexible and more tool agnostic as an analyst. So a little bit about me, as Caesar mentioned, I am a chartered accountant by trade. And when I was on assignment in Australia 3 years ago, I kind of discovered a love for analytics and data visualization. Tableau and Alteryx being my first foray into this world, and the rest you can say is history. Since then, I've returned to PwC Canada, where I'm currently working as a business intelligence and analytics manager. As Caesar mentioned, I've kind of been super experimental with my analytics journey. So I've dabbled in Power BI. So through there, I've had to get my Microsoft certification as a data analyst. I was also recently recognized as a Tableau public featured author early in the year. And I'm also super passionate about Alteryx. Alteryx, as I mentioned, was a big part in my transition as well from Excel into analytics, and really enjoy working with that tool. If you're interested, you can follow me on my blog or my website at jrcopreros.com, or just follow me on Twitter at jrcopreros. So I put this slide here. You all know what this meme is all about, but this is essentially a pretty accurate depiction of what happened when some guys in Australia first showed me Alteryx and Tableau. At this point, I was very knee deep in just being an Excel PowerPoint guy, doing things, and literally Alteryx and Tableau changed my mindset and outlook and would change the course of my career from then on. So a little bit more on the fun side. Key objectives here, as I mentioned, really expand your data prep toolkit so that you can increase your flexibility and capability to solve problems as a data analyst and as a hobbyist, because I know a lot of us here don't necessarily may not use Tableau for work, but we're very active in the public visualization scene. So hopefully these tips and tricks will help you get that as well. So next up, first and foremost, I want to define what is not modern Excel. So shout out to Emily and team for the amazing tunes, by the way, that have been blasting throughout this festival. And I want to give you guys one more throwback. Who remembers this video called Dilemma, where it was Nelly featuring Kelly Rowland? So there's this infamous scene in this music video where Kelly is frustrated with Nelly's character and decides to send him a text. And if you look closely, Kelly Rowland infamously used Microsoft Excel on a Nokia communicator to text Nelly in this music video, and the text reads, "Where you at? Holla when you get here." And suffice to say, this is probably why Nelly never showed up, because Excel at this point was not a text messaging tool. And thank God this is not the be all end all for what modern Excel is all about. So what is modern Excel? So this term is not an official term, but it is a term that's used in the industry to describe a new suite of tools came out in about 2010. That were developed for Microsoft Excel that is effective for data wrangling and data modeling. Its main components are Power Query and Power Pivot. Power Query is also called Get and Transform, and this will be the focus of our session. And to me, this is really powerful because when I first discovered this, I didn't know I even had it, and I pretty much had access to this tool as anyone did who had Excel since I started my job. So when I discovered this, I just knew that it was something that I needed to keep in my toolkit. And I've heard it described like this. It's like VBA macros, but with low to no code at all. So anytime I see low code to no code, I'm quite happy. Power Query, as I mentioned, is a data wrangling and ETL tool that's built inside Excel. The way you access it is through the data tab within Excel. And you'll be able to kind of get information there in terms of what that tool can do. From there, you can essentially do extraction, importing data from various sources, such as CSVs, text files, and whatnot. You can do transformations like data cleansing, removing spaces, and you can output your data as a CSV or Excel workbook for visualization later on in the process. One caveat here is the low query building interface that I'm about to show you next is only available for Windows right now. And if you're using a Mac, you are able to refresh existing queries that have already been built But if you were to edit it or you were to manipulate the queries, you would have to use VBA code on a Mac. But no word yet on when this will be available for Mac. So just keep that in mind as we go on. Cool. Caesar, just a quick check. I'm seeing some things on the chat. Everything okay? I guess I'll take that as a...
Yeah, everything so far is fine. You're getting a lot of laughs and definitely a lot of commentary too going on. So a lot of people...
It was good.
There's one that's like, Power Query's best, freest tool nobody's ever heard of. And,
No, good. Awesome. So I'll definitely revisit that later. So use case number one, we'll start. Okay, cool. We'll start off with something super simple, which is just data extraction from a local location on your computer. So the scenario here is you receive multiple workbooks from different sales periods of your business, all in the same format. Typically, you'd need to open each workbook, perform some cleansing, and then copy and paste the data into a master spreadsheet for some sort of aggregation. So we'll quickly jump into Excel, and I'll do a demo of how this will work. So I'll just open a new workbook. And the way to access this, once again, is going into the Data tab or the Data ribbon in Excel. And you should see a section here called Get and Transform. We'll go ahead and trigger this and say Get Data. And from File, we're just going to go From Folder, because remember, our use case involves multiple files from our workbook. And just to show you what I mean, the folder essentially is this. So I've got Superstore sales for 2016 all the way to 2019. So I'm going to go ahead and extract this, load this as a folder. Power Query would then give you this like navigator screen. Right now, it's just giving you the metadata of the files that you've loaded. We're going to go ahead and select Transform because we want to do some manipulation before we kind of stack these data sets together. This query editor interface shows up. It's not as drag and drop or as visual as Alteryx or Tableau Prep as of yet, but I'll show you how you can go about using this interface. So at the Home tab above, you've got your options, straightforward things like splitting columns, grouping by, and all sorts of other pretty basic transformation tools that you can use. So to stack this data set, I'm just going to go ahead and click Combine Files here. And what will happen now is I will get a preview of my data set as it connects. So right now, it's loading the first file in my folder, which is the 2016 file. I click on that. And what I'm seeing here is essentially, I've got some columns of data. I've got a header row in here. So I probably want to get rid of that. If I want to see what the other files look like, I can go ahead and just check out what 2018 looks like and whatnot. So it looks like I've got the files that I need. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And when I click OK now, it should just load. And there you go. I've got a preview of my data set. So this area right here is essentially the preview screen. And it's actually an interactive preview screen. So I can, let's say if I want to get rid of, the period row, I can go ahead and actually just, filter for anything that's null. Actually not null, I'll just say does not include period or row ID. Let me actually, that's the opposite. I'm just gonna select everything except period and row ID. And that essentially gets rid of the period and row ID. I also probably wanna get rid of the nulls in my data set. Hit OK, so that gets rid of the nulls. Next thing I want to do, actually, maybe I'll keep my row ID because that gives me my header names. The next thing I want to do is I want to promote the first row as my column name. So there's a function here called use first row as headers. And just like that, we've got a list of, my columns have been promoted as my header rows. And from there, that's pretty much it. So I think I've done all the cleansing I need. I'll probably get rid of some of my unused columns here. One trick that I'll show you, and what's pretty cool here is there's a function in Power Query called column from example, and I'll expand on this later on. But let's say I wanted to extract 2016 as and put it as a period column. So I'm going to go ahead and just go to the add column, and then I'm going to go to column from examples up here, and I'm just going to go from selection. And this is pretty cool. So it's basically regex by way of just like natural language. So I'm just going to go type 2016, and it's just going to extract 2016. And if I go lower, if I see here 2017 is now also extracted automatically. This is obviously a pretty simple example. I'll show you a more complex example later where we're parsing stuff, let's say from an email string. I'm going to go ahead and rename this as my period. And yeah, I think I'm good to go, except there's additional row ID rows in my data set, so I'm going to get rid of that. And what you'll notice here, I didn't really touch on this earlier, but as I was adding steps, there's a section here called applied steps. So there's actually audit trail of what I'm doing. And as a former auditor, this to me is, when I first saw this is gold. And this is exactly why I fell in love with a tool like Alteryx or Tableau Prep, is the ability to leave the source data untouched, have all these transformations, but have a record of what these transformations are doing. So that gives me peace of mind that no one has kind of played around with the data in between. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to close and load, and it's just going to load the data into a new column, sorry, a new sheet in my Excel workbook, and there you go. So I've got my periods here all the way to 2019. Awesome. So I'm just going to go ahead and save this just in case it crashes. Modern Excel, local. Cool. And from here, I can essentially load this file into Tableau as my data source if needed. Awesome. So moving along to my second use case, so something a little bit more exciting. So it's data extraction from a web table, right? So I know a lot of us here are on a constant lookout for data sets, and we see this awesome web table online that we want to get data for. So in this scenario, the use case is you need to obtain historical stock prices for components of the S&P 500. And for those of you who don't know what that is, that's just an index of the 500 largest companies in the US stock market, and you want to analyze the performance over the past year. Typically, you'd need to Google to obtain the components of the S&P 500 as well as the historical prices. So I've gone ahead and I've discovered that there's some awesome data sets on Google, through Google, and on Wikipedia, I just found this list of S&P 500 companies. Got some pretty good information here in terms of the security name, what industry they're in, etc. So we're going to go ahead and see if we can parse that in. The other thing is I've got a Google sheet where I've essentially used like the Google Finance function to pull up stock prices for those components of the S&P 500. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that in as well. So I'm going to open a new workbook here. Actually, yes, I'll do that just so that you guys can see how it works. The same starting point, I'm going to go from data, but instead of text CSV, I'm going to go to web. I'm going to cut and paste the Wikipedia link that I saw earlier that I wanted to extract data from. Hit OK. And I should get a preview of that. And what's cool here is Power Query has detected the elements on that web page. So there's a S&P 500 table here. And there's also a selected changes list to the S&P 500, which could be interesting if you wanted to go ahead and use that. You can see the web view as well. So you can see it kind of messes up the HTML, but we'll stick with table view for now. I'm quite happy with this, but if you recall, I want to be able to combine my stock prices table here. So I'm going to click transform, and that will just give me the preview of my stock components table. Next thing is I want to bring in that Google sheet that I created. So I'm going to hit, you can hit right click on this query screen, hit new query. This is also a web link. So I'm going to go ahead and go to web. I'm going to copy the link over from my Google spreadsheet. The key here is for you to be able to link, for you to be able to extract Google Sheets, the Google Sheet needs to be set to a to public sharing settings. So I highly recommend that you only use this for non-sensitive data. So I go ahead and load that. And just like that, we've got now my data set in Google Sheets. I'm going to hit OK. I'm liking what I see, but you can see there's some cleansing that needs to be done here. So I'll go over some use cases. First things first, we're just going to use the same thing that we covered earlier. We're going to promote the first row as headers. I'm going to probably get rid of this column that I don't want. And you notice here that the steps continue to be tracked. What I don't like here is my dates right now are set up across as columns. And what I want is I want to set this up so that it's transposed, so that's one column for the date field. So pretty easy. I'm just going to right click on this, and there's an option here to say unpivot other columns. And just like that, I've got an unpivoted workflow. I'm going to call this date. Double click and just call this date. And I'm just going to call this the value. And you can also change data types. So I'm going to just go ahead and change this to date. And that's it. So I'm just going to do a little bit of cleaning up here. So this is my S&P 500 information. This is my S&P 500 prices. Cool. Now at this point, I can load this into Excel, and I can load this into Tableau. Using the new relationships feature in Tableau, I can essentially just connect these two separate sheets, and Tableau will immediately recognize the relationship between the two based on the ticker. But let's say instead of loading two separate files, I wanted a flat file where, in addition to the ticker, I wanted to get the industry and the name of the security on my prices file. That way, I'm just loading one flat file. So traditionally in Excel, you would do a VLOOKUP, but with Power Query, VLOOKUP is essentially out of the picture. We'll go ahead and select this function called merge queries. So merge queries is another way of basically doing a join in Power Query. So it first asks you what table is you want to join together. So I want to join my S&P 500 prices, and I want to join my S&P 500 info. I select the column that I want to join by. So in this case, I want to join by the ticker, and I want to join by the symbol in the bottom table. It also has some neat, like just feedback features, or just tells you whether there's a match or not. And in this case, there's about, I guess, 500 records or so that are not matching. So we can deal with that later. But for the purpose of this example, this is essentially what I wanted to accomplish. So I hit OK. And this will now merge the two data sets together. If I click this expand button here, I can choose what field I want to bring in from that other table. So I just want to get the security name and the industry, and then I'm going to hit OK. And just like that, I now have a flat table with prices with blended and merged stock industry information. I'm going to go ahead and load this to, I'm just going to call this S&P 500 merged. I'm just going to load this. And once I load this, I should get three tabs. The first tab is my info. This one's my prices, and my third tab is my merged. So you can go ahead and if you don't want to deal with the other two tabs, you can go ahead and right click on this and select load to, and just do only create a connection. And what this does is it prevents Excel from loading it as a sheet. So that basically disappears from your sheet from now on. Cool. I think that's pretty much it for this example. I'll go ahead and save this as well. Modern Excel, S&P 500. Cool. Jumping on to my next use case. Essentially, use case number 2 is data cleansing and reshaping. And in this past section, we just covered how to promote rows, promote headers, and then be able to kind of reshape the data set and transposing it. And I will do more examples later on where I'll show you how I've used it to supercharge some of my data viz work in Tableau. Cool. So use case number 3, there was an awesome session earlier today by Katie on a data scaffold. And what it is, and this is just a definition that I borrowed from the Flurridge Twins website. And it is a temporary or artificial structure used to arrange data in a certain way to aid in the creation of a data visualization. As Katie mentioned in her presentation, as you would know, a data scaffold can be created in Tableau Desktop, Tableau Prep, or Alteryx. But in this case, I'll show you how to do one in Power Query. So the use case in this case is you have been asked to analyze sales during the year by customer for a retail store. However, not all customers purchase during the year. And you need to ensure that your visualization shows all 12 months of the year, regardless of where the data, whether there's data for all 12 months. So the use case here, again, is from the Flurridge Twins website. So on the left, you've got a highlight table where you've got customer name as rows, and you've got a discrete column for all the months during the year. So before you apply any filters, all is well, because in your data set, everything is accounted for, right? So you should have data for every month during the year and for all years, provided that no filters have been applied. However, as you can see here, once you start to apply some filters, so in this case, borrowing from this example, we're only going to filter for the first 7 names in our data set. And what you'll notice is some months disappear from the view. In this case, February, March, July, etc., because those left in the view do not have sales for certain months. I'll also add that even though we've got Aaron Bergman selected here, in this particular data set, I've filtered for 2019, and Aaron Bergman did not have sales in 2019, so he doesn't even show up on the highlight table. So with the use of a data scaffold, we're essentially going to fix this issue to ensure that we're always showing all customers for all months, regardless of what filters we have in effect in our view. So we'll go ahead and show you how this is done. So just jumping back in Tableau. So this is the example I showed you earlier without the data scaffold. So going down to just 2019. And I'm just going to select the first 7 customers here. You'll notice I've got 7 selected, but only 7 selected, but only 6 are showing up because Aaron Bergman did not have sales in 2019. So I'll show you how to do a data scaffold using the same principles covered in an earlier session, but this time in Power Query. So the data set we're going to use in this case is I've just got the sample superstore data set that comes with Tableau. So I'm going to go ahead and go to data. This is an Excel data set, so I'm going to go to get data from file from workbook. Then I'm going to go to my data sets here. Then I'm going to go to sample superstore copy. So that will load. I'm just worried about orders at the moment. So I'm just going to go ahead and select orders and then transform. By the way, if you wanted to edit multiple sheets at the same time, just trigger this select multiple items checkbox, and you should be able to select multiple sheets. But this time I just want orders, and that should be good to go. I'm going to go ahead and click transform because I want to play around with this. So the way a data scaffold works is in order for us to always show all customers and all dates in our data set, we first want to create a unique list of orders. a unique list of order dates and a unique list of customers, we're going to combine those to provide us essentially a full population of every single combination of date and customer that is applicable in our data set. And then we're going to join that back into our orders data set in order to achieve the data scaffold. So first things first, no dramas here. Sample Superstore is clean. So what I want to do is I want to first create a query that will isolate and give me a unique list of order dates. So to do this, I want to keep my orders data set. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to duplicate this query, and no need to reload it again because I know it's already there. I'm going to call this unique dates.
Someone's at front door.
Oops, sorry about that. Unique dates, and this is pretty easy. I just right click on order date, and I'm going to select group by. And what this will do is it will, similar to what you would use the summarize tool in Alteryx for, this will essentially just do a group by of all possible dates in your data set. The aggregation that they require here doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to click OK. And what you'll get is a unique list of order dates, and we can get rid of this count column, right? One thing to note here when you're doing a data scaffold in this step is you want to be able to join your unique list of dates against the unique list of customers. So to do this, we're essentially going to do a cross join, but since there's no default cross join or append fields function in Power Query, we're going to create a dummy field, and just it can be whatever really. I'm just going to create a custom column up there. I'm just going to call this my cross join field. You can be ever, in this case, I'll just put a 1, and I'll just put the number 1 next to every record in my unique dates. So what's awesome here is I've done all this work to create my query for unique dates. I could go ahead and start over from orders again and reapply the same steps. But if I like the structure of this query, I can just duplicate this specific query and call this one unique customers, right? And what's cool is instead of redoing everything, I'm just going to go ahead to the step where I did my group rows. So in this case, I'm going to just go hit this gear icon. But instead of order date, I'm going to select customer ID and customer name. The basic setting does not allow me to select multiple group bys, but if you click advanced, you can add another grouping. So I'm going to go ahead and click customer ID, and I'm going to click customer name as my group by. The reason I'm doing both is a customer name, two people can be called the same name. So having that customer ID as an additional group by ensures that I have a true and more complete unique columns, unique customer names list. Again, the aggregation does not matter. But at this point, if I just go back all the way to the end of my query, I've got a unique list of customers. And because I've already done the cross-join field in the previous query, I don't have to redo this formula. So it's pretty efficient. Next thing I want to do is, as we covered earlier, I'm just going to go ahead and merge these two. So I'm going to go ahead and go to home. I'm just going to click on, I'm going to click on merge as new because I want to make it a new query. And then I'm going to do unique dates in one and unique customers in another. I'm just going to select cross join and cross join field. And this will just essentially append both fields together. So that will process. I'm just going to call this, merge one is fine. The last step in my data scaffold workflow is I need to then join my merge back to my orders ID, so to my orders table. So I'm just going to do the same thing. This time I'm just going to do merge queries. I've got orders as my first table, and I'm going to merge it with my merge table. So in this case, let me just check what I've done here. One thing I forgot to do that I did in my previous step was I need to always expand after a merge. So in this case, I want to expand on customer name and customer ID. That way my merge table includes a unique order date for each customer and their name. So going back to this, I'm just going to click merge again. I'm going to merge against my merge table. In this case, the way you can do a multi-join is just hold the control key or on a PC, and this time I'm just going to do order date, customer ID, and customer name. You'll notice that a 1, 2, 3 has appeared here. So when you choose what field to join on, you just need to do it in the same order. So I'm just going to go to 1, 2, 3. And again, I'll get a preview here that will say, good. So in this case, our merge worked perfectly because we've got a perfect match between my orders table and my merge table. I won't cover it in this session, but there's also some fuzzy matching options here. So if you don't have an exact reference, you can certainly invoke that fuzzy matching functionality to do some of that. And click OK. Once again, don't forget to expand your merge. I'm probably just going to rename this. I'm going to rename this Scaffold, so it's not confusing. And then I'm just going to expand it. Then I'm just going to expand everything that I see. And just like that, we should now have a data scaffold for every, a data scaffold should be complete. One thing that I will point out, it didn't quite work, because what you should expect to see is for each customer, there should be a whole chunk of dates for when they didn't buy anything, but is in the data set. And the reason for this is in my merge query, I've set it up as a left outer join, but with a cross join, you essentially want to do a full outer. So it's matching everything from both the left and the right, including anything that instances where there's no dates or sales for a particular customer. So that will take a few minutes, few seconds to load. So just like that, I'm pretty much done. I'm going to hit close and load. And while that loads, it'll probably take a minute or two. I'll just show you then the impact of this effect. So I've done this exercise earlier. So in my modern Excel data scaffold file, what you should see is a list of, you should see essentially, there should be some nulls in here for times where a customer didn't sell anything, didn't buy anything. So going to my data scaffold example, right? So in this case, I'm just going to start over with everything selected. So with the data scaffold intact, if I did the same thing where I just filtered for 2019, you'll notice that this is fine for now. All the data showing up, but as I just filter for the top 7, or sorry, the first 7, you'll notice that you'll notice that the dates, the discrete dates, have stayed intact regardless of who's in view. And this is super important because, as was pointed out in the example on the Fleur Twin site, someone like Aaron Bergman, right? In this case, he shows up in our view despite not having sales. And this is an important insight because this shows us that there's an opportunity to actually sell to Aaron Bergman and knowing that he's purchased with us before. So hopefully that helps. We'll go back to my last use case. And again, this will just be an expansion of the data extraction regex use case that I presented earlier. This time, I'm going to just do something more complex. Say you've got a, let me just open a new workbook here. Say you've got some Spotify data where you've got information on your, let me just find this use case. I think I might have it already open. Just give me a second here. Let me just pull the right file. Okay, so cool. So I've got my Spotify data set here, right? So in this data set, I've got the URL and the artist URL for each track. And what I want to be able to do is just extract the track ID and the artist ID from this data set. So you can, the way to do this is you can actually extract data from a range. You can trigger Power Query from a range. I'm just going to go from table and from range. I'm going to go ahead and create a table. My data has headers, so I'm going to click OK. And just like that, this should now pop up. And using the same technique that I showed you earlier, under add column, we're going to say column from examples. In this case, I'm going to start with my track URL column. I'm going to say column from example using selection. I'm going to go ahead and just extract and copy this ID section. So I'm going to double click and just paste that. And there you go. So it's done essentially a regex type parse. Another example here is, obviously this is, you probably would not need to do this, but let's say you wanted to extract something in the middle, let's say the word track. So same thing here, I'm just gonna go to from selection, and I'm just gonna use track, and there you go. So pretty easy, regex with little to no code in this example. Obviously this is pretty simple, but as you can imagine, there's some pretty complex patterns, but if it's a pretty consistent pattern, you can just use this text from columns function and be able to pull the information that you need. Cool. So a couple of use cases where I've essentially used Power Query to kind of prepare. So this first one was my viz on income inequality in Toronto. So this was actually done using Alteryx and Power Query. So I kind of wanted to just continue to practice my Power Query capabilities. So the data set that I was working with was from the Toronto census. So I'll give you an example of what that looked like as it loads. So it kind of looked like this, where the features of my data set were set up as as rows, and the neighborhoods of Toronto was set up as columns. So using Power Query, I was able to kind of cross-tab my the features that I wanted and transpose the neighborhoods of Toronto so that I got the data in a format that was conducive to my analysis. Next one, I did a viz on sugar content in cereal. So this was a fun viz in that we were given data set from a Makeover Monday challenge where we had cereals and the sugar content in grams for each cereal. So I did some research and I wanted to essentially see if I can combat like some statistical numbing, right? When you see a sugar content in grams information in the cereal box, sometimes you see 34 or 28 and it's hard to make sense of what that actually means. So I went ahead and converted that number in terms of Skittles. So what I ended up doing was using Power Query, I essentially did a dot densification exercise where based on the number of sugars in my, for each cereal, I essentially generated rows up to that number of, up to that count, and created essentially a random X and Y coordinate that showed, that allowed me to do the jitter plot in my visualization for each type of cereal. So hopefully that was really useful. My key takeaways here is, embrace expanding your data preparation toolkit and perhaps even your data viz toolkit. This really helps you, as I mentioned earlier, increase your flexibility and capability to solve problems as a data analyst as well as a hobbyist. You may not always have access to tools that you have access now, and sometimes you may be limited as well in terms of what the client has access to. So the more you know, the better. And this one's my favorite one. Learnings in one area can be transferable in other areas. So when I spoke about my journey earlier, a lot of what I learned in Alteryx, I actually started to apply in how I would use and how I would use Excel or other tools. So that's something that I really value when it comes to exploring other tools that you may not necessarily be familiar with now. So with that said, I just want to say thank you. I'm going to open up the floor for any questions and hope I can answer that to my best ability.
Awesome, JR. Thanks so much. That's really cool. We get to see behind the curtain on how the process works for a lot of your viz. That's great. Yeah, we got a lot of holy moly, that was incredible. Yeah. But yeah, if anybody has questions, yeah, definitely feel free to post them up in the QA. I'm also watching the chat. Not many questions in the chat, but really good conversation. A lot of almost the history of Power BI and kind of what had merged to become Power BI.
Yes.
Some talk about the M query language. Um, Also some good talk about Tableau Fringe Foundation swag.
Yeah, so that was a point I meant to make earlier was even though this is an Excel, it's a function that existed in Excel for a while, it's also the data prep function that is built into Power BI as well. So yes, for all you Power BI users as well, hopefully this was not news to you.
I think a lot of folks picked that up right away too. So that was definitely a plus. But it's awesome to see kind of what happens and how you put these together too, just from the data set, because I don't think a lot of people see that. They see the finished product. They don't quite get what we do on the backside when we put something out on public.
Yeah,
And
that's true.
and a lot of it, I find the data prep part probably the most fun too.
Yeah, yeah. It's sort of the most rewarding when when you're able to wrangle, something that was pretty messy at some point. Like that census data when I first saw that. I mean, it makes sense. It probably saves them a lot of space, but it was not conducive to just drag and drop in Tableau as soon as that happened.
Exactly. It's so cool to be able to do that, and I think it's always kind of fun to it's like find those little paths or um, the rabbit trails. I will not say rabbit hole, but yeah, that's someone else's. But yeah. I don't see any questions coming through.
Cool.
Keeping one eye on the QA.
Yep, no, all good. So thank you guys so much for having me on. Hopefully that was super insightful and sparked some conversations. And yeah, definitely don't be afraid to explore. I was an Excel user for like 5 years, and in year 5 was when I discovered it. So a lot of these things are sometimes they're right under your nose. So yeah, don't be afraid to explore. If you feel free to follow me on social media, on my Twitter or my LinkedIn, or as mentioned on my blog at jrcopreros.com. So thanks again, guys.
Awesome. Thanks a ton. And people really like that, and yeah, a lot of thanks coming through through the chat. So thanks
Thank you,
for coming
guys.
on.
Much appreciated. No worries.
Very first time here at TFF. We hope you definitely
Yeah,
come
it's
back.
pretty fun. Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful. All right, cool. Well, we will take a short break.